Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's Tools and Techniques session. Hope you're all doing well on this cold evening. Today, we will be hosting someone that most people will probably know of, and this is Paul Benn. And before I give an introduction of Paul, I would like to just run over some house rules. So if you have a question, please feel free to post them in the chat, and then either Nosipo or myself will read them to Paul, and this will happen at the end of the session, and he will gladly answer any questions that the audience may have. If you still have questions and the session has come to an end, please feel free to email us the questions, and we'll be sure to get Paul to answer them for you. If you would like to share this presentation with any of your friends or come back to it afterwards, please remember that it will be posted on our YouTube channel after. As always, to become a member of the IBA, please go to the website listed on the screen. We will post it in the chat as well. And you also have the opportunity to put your name forward if you would like to present at one of our Tools and Techniques sessions. And for the next event, please be sure to keep an eye out. Our events are always posted on our Wild Apricot website. And this session today will be hosted by the Cape Town branch of IBA. So to give a brief introduction of Paul, he grew up in South Africa and he fell into business analysis quite early in his career. He worked most of his life in the financial industry on various projects, and this has seen him sent to countries such as Denmark and London. While he was in South Africa, he was a volunteer for the IBA South Africa, and I think that's how most of us know his familiar face. He was a conference speaker and a track chair for the BA Summit before he moved to New Zealand in 2018 to further his career as a global citizen. In New Zealand, he's been privileged to work on some innovative projects involving, including the NZDT and other organizations. And he's also a member of the board for the IBA New Zealand chapter, so taking his expertise over the border. His passion is building people's career journeys, and with that, he started a company called Altitude Journeys, a vehicle to support, inspire, and help people achieve more out of their careers. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our special guest this evening, Paul.
Righto, thank you everyone. Just give me a moment just to get everything set up and going. Just want to share my screen. Give me a shout out if you can see that. And let's get my ugly face up on the screen. There we go.
Yes,
you can see. Righto. Yeah, well, thank you, Larissa, for that introduction. I'm not sure everyone knows who I am, but I'll take it. Thank you very much. Just a little bit more to add to what Larissa is saying. Yes, I live in Wellington, New Zealand. This picture over here is a picture of the harbour over Wellington. These are the ferries that go down to the North Island. If you don't know, New Zealand is made up of 2 islands. Interesting fact is right about here, you can see my point on the screen, is one of our major fault lines for the earthquakes, and it runs all the way up State Highway 2. Interesting place to live in, especially when the building starts to quake. So I'm a consultant, business analyst consultant for Red Vespa. We specialize in business analysis. I'm also a coach and mentor for students at the ICT Graduate School of Business. The ICT Graduate School, not Graduate School of Business, where I mentor and coach the Masters in Business Analysis students. And then I also work with business mentors, which is helping small startups get going in the business world. So please feel free to contact me or connect with me on any of the channels that you see on the screen. I'll put the slide up a bit later as well for you to have a look at. So when we're talking about pathways to business analysis, get my clicker to work, there we go, to strategic business analysis, I think it's important for us to start off defining what strategic business analysis is, because we need to know what the end destination point looks like and is when we go on a journey like this or a roadmap towards it. Then I want to kind of look at the job market as a further way of defining strategic business, but also to give an idea of what are the kind of opportunities out there in the job market for a strategic business analyst. And then we'll kind of move into the pathway to strategic business analysis. And it's pathway is probably not exactly the right term, but it's the journey into strategic business analysis. And just a couple of pointers that I've seen in the clients that I coach into strategic business analysis type roles. So when we define strategic business analysis, as I said earlier, it's important to define it properly. And I'll give you a little story as to why. Shortly after I arrived in New Zealand, I applied for a role in an organization I was working for at the time to be to work within a strategic business analysis role. And I didn't get the position. And I started to just question, as I normally do after I go to an interview and I don't get the opportunity, because it's just a way of learning. And it became very apparent to me that when I was answering the questions, I was answering from the wrong definition of strategic business analysis. And so this is why I think it's important for us to define what is strategic business analysis. And in this definition, I want to look at it. Is it a title? Is it the word strategic that's added at the beginning of business analysis? Is it a position? Is it a role within an organization? Or is it, I'm sorry, a little spelling mistake there. Didn't pick that one up. Is it a business analysis capability or competency? And to answer this question, I start off with the IABA, because after all, we are IABA people. And on the IABA website, they talk about strategic business analysis as follows. Strategic business analysis requires a focus on all aspects of the organization. It leverages business analysis, change leadership, and program and project management. And the takeaway from that definition for me is, first of all, it's a focus on all aspects of the organization. And the second takeaway from that is that it leverages business analysis. And for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to call business analysis normal or traditional business, not to minimize the value of business, but just as a way to differentiate between strategic analysis and normal or traditional business analysis, the kind of business analysis that you and I are quite well versed in our careers. The second definition that I want to bring into this is from the IABA Strategy to Execution Framework. And it says it's how organizations move from strategy to execution. So that's the third key for me. And I'd like to propose that we bring these two together, that we can say strategic business analysis guides the strategy to execution while focusing on the organization as a whole using normal or traditional business analysis skills. So let's unpack it a little bit more and see how that fits in with business analysis. You'll recognize this diagram from the Babcock if you've read it before. Excuse me, get some water. So as you can see, strategic analysis is pre-project and works its way into the project itself. In the middle of the project is what I would call or say is traditional normal business analysis. That is where we're working with a product, a design, a solution, and the delivery of the project. And then we start with some solution evaluation and we come out the other end. And within all of that, we're using our traditional BA skills. So we're using our planning and monitoring, we're using our licitations and collaborations and requirement life cycles and all that. But strategy analysis starts before the project. So it's at a different point of a project. And I'd like to propose that it's probably more there's more uncertainty and ambiguity at that point, because when you start with strategy analysis, you're almost starting with a blank canvas. Whereas when you're starting with a project, you've got some sort of guidance because you've been given some strategic initiative from the strategy analysis level. Like you might be given the solution scope that you can work within. And at the end of the project, there's a feedback loop that goes back in strategy. So your elicitation that you've used, your solution evaluations, which includes your enterprise evaluations as well, and your post-project reviews are all going to feed back into your strategy analysis. So we're starting to see the differentiation between strategic business analysis and normal or traditional business analysis. You also remember this diagram again, which just reiterates the kind of the dotted line between strategic analysis and the normal business analysis. And there is an overlap between the two of these. There is some overlap. It's not a clear-cut line. So I'm not proposing that they're totally different things, not at all. But when we're talking about the strategic business analysis, we're talking about the vision, we're talking about the strategy, and we're talking about the implementation plan. So just again, to reiterate, this is kind of the space that I see strategic analysis happening. And it goes a little bit into this side. And this is the doing. This is how we're going to do what we have decided to do over here. So in the strategy side of business, it's looking at why an enterprise needs to change some aspect of how it operates. And it also needs to look at what needs to change in order for the organization to move. There's one more slide that I want to just look at when we talk about and define strategic business analysis. So you can define business analysis into three different aspects or three different levels, whatever you want to call it. And that is strategic, tactical, and operational. So at the strategic level, this is something like enterprise analysis, as we said, the focus on the whole organization and encompass all the pre-project work to identify business problems, define the business opportunities, develop business cases, change strategies, and to recommend whether a project should be initiated or not. At the tactical level is where we look at and see the traditional business analysis role. That's the role that probably 9/10 of us, if not all of us, are quite familiar with, where we're working within a project mode and delivering a particular solution. At the operational level, this is more concerned with the business use of information systems, use of stakeholder requirements and user stories if you're working in Agile, and also transitional requirements. So I don't think strategic business analysis is so much a level question, but what I'm starting to see come through this definition is that strategic analysis is a different focus to the traditional or normal business analysis. And hopefully in the slides that we've seen so far, you've started to see the distinction between the normal and traditional business analysis versus the strategic business analysis. So now that we define business analysis and we have position where strategic business analysis sits within context of normal business analysis, let's have a look at the job market. What does the job market tell us about the strategic business role? And I think it's important because if you're going to go for any role, you kind of want to see like what's the opportunity, but also let's all be honest, we want to know that there's money in it for us. I mean, we're in this career because we want to earn a living and want to earn a decent living, but you also want to have the opportunities. So it's always useful when you're moving careers or changing jobs or pivoting your career to look at what is in the job market. But it also helps us to kind of define what is strategic business analysis. So I started with looking at the roadmap or the different roles or pathways that business analysts can go and take. And the interesting thing, if you look at that diagram there, can you see strategic business analysts anywhere? Okay, so there's the strategist there under the design thinking. So that's not strategic analysis. That is it's about aligning products to the problem by design within design thinking. So it's not quite what we're looking at. So that's not really strategic analysis. But you'll notice that there's no pathway, there's no role within this from the IBA that talks about the strategic business and its role. But I do think in each one of these, there's an element of strategic analysis competency or skill set that can be used within an organizational level. So let's look a little bit further at this. So I looked at a couple of job boards, Career Junction, PNet, and LinkedIn, and I typed in various variations of strategic business analysis using various like strategy, strategic, and all sorts of words. And I didn't come up with one business analyst title that had the word strategic in it. What I did see was there's a job from Intellect, Larissa. You can see there. Interesting. I then looked at a couple of these roles, and I looked more deeply into the job spec of these. And not one of them kind of had any strategic business analysis competencies or requirements in any of them. And so here's my takeaway from this. I don't believe that this is a job title called strategic business analysis. There's no official role or position. But what I do believe it is, it's a capability where we use strategic analysis related skills together with our normal business analysis skills, looking at different perspectives. For instance, from a strategic point of view, we're looking at from an organizational level versus the normal traditional business where we're normally looking from a project delivery point of view. But does that mean that the strategic business doesn't exist? Does that mean that we cannot be a strategic business analyst? And I think the answer is no. I do think that strategic business analysis or a strategic business is something that organizations haven't quite cottoned on to yet. I also do believe that one doesn't need to be in the role of strategic business analyst to be strategic. You can be strategic right where you are. John Maxwell says opportunity is grown into and not given. So you don't wait for you to be in some sort of role that allows you to use your strategic business skills. Rather start using it where you are. There's another element to this. And in my job search, I started to look at what are some of the roles out there that are involved in strategic analysis or strategic strategies of organizations. And there are two that came up quite regularly, and that was strategy consultant or strategy and portfolio analyst. And these are probably the two closest when I read the job specs of a couple of these that I saw online that actually use business analysis skill sets to be strategic within an organization. So for me, what it's looking like, if I had to be honest right now, is that if you want to move into a strategic business analyst role, you can be strategic where you are. But I also think that you need to let go and not be hung up by the title, by the word strategic in your title. There are plenty of roles out there that you can transgress into or move into using your business analysis skills. And part of my coaching that I do with my clients is looking at past jobs and saying, what skill set do I have that I can transfer into the role that I want to work in? And this is exactly what it is. It's taking our business analysis skill and it's actually transferring that skill into a role that is probably more strategic, but where we can still practice our craft of business analysis. So let's get on to some of the pathways to strategic business analysis. And these are kind of just As an IABA representative, obviously I like the IABA tools, and you don't have to use the IABA tools. And in this presentation, I'm just using them as an example of what you can do to get into kind of a strategic business analysis role, or to be more strategic in your role as a business analyst where you are now. And so up to this point, hopefully you have picked up so far that it's about competency, it's about skill set, it's about a perspective or mindset. And there's a third one I want to add in there. It's about working within a framework. Most organizations will have some sort of framework that they use for their strategic analysis work. You as a business analyst want to get used to working within a framework, used to be able to taking your business analysis skills and fitting them into a framework. So I'm going to use the framework here as just an example of how you can, of an example of what you can do. But I want to start off and talking about the mindset, because we have been talking a bit about that up until this point. So when we're talking about strategic business, the first thing, if you remember earlier, is I talked about the organizational focus versus project delivery focus. So there's a mindset shift that happens. Also, the BABAC talk, when it talks about strategic analysis, it says in just enough detail. And that's very different to when we work in project mode where we actually do a lot of detail. Even in Agile, we started with high level, but even in Agile, we'll work down to detail in order to get to a solution. So the level of detail at a strategic level is a lot higher than probably the level at detail at a normal or traditional business analyst role. And for some people, that is difficult. I know for myself that's difficult because I'm a very detailed person. So when I work with my small business startups, I had to change my focus. I have to actually physically step back and not go into detail. Furthermore, strategic business analysis focus on the what and the why. What are we changing within the organization? And what is the reason? What is the rationale for us to change? Which is very different at the project delivery level, where, yeah, we're also answering the question why, but we're actually more answering the question, how are we going to implement the strategic objectives? How are we going to implement the solution? So there's a very clear distinction between the mindset. And when you're transforming from business analysis into strategic analysis, you've got to make that mind shift. A lot of us who will work as strategic business analysts will probably work across the two. And certainly in my career, I've worked across the two. There are times when I work strategically and there are times when I work as a normal business analyst. The next level is I want to talk about competency. And I'm going to use the competency model just as a reference point, so that you don't have to use the competency model. But if you don't know about the competency model within IABA, really a great tool if you want to improve your level of business analysis competency, because it takes you through a structured format to take you from being just a generous beginner BA right up to a very senior level BA. And in the competency model, it has these levels of proficiency. At the very bottom is your general awareness, and that's probably someone who's just entering or about to enter into business analysis, and it goes all the way up to strategist. And this proficiency model is used within all of the capabilities that we see within the BABAC for a business analyst. And it's a tool that helps you get more skilled and competent in your business analysis craft. But just to be clear, when we talk about strategist, this is not a strategic business analyst. Strategist is just a level of proficiency. But I think it's a useful takeaway when we're talking about the pathway to strategic business analysis. As a strategic business analyst, you're going to be operating at a strategic business analyst level, probably working with leaders, C-suite people, and those kind of things. And you kind of want to have the credibility. In fact, not kind of, you want to have the credibility, you want to have the authority, and you want to have the ability at a more senior level, particularly in a strategist type leadership role, because strategists are people that are innovative. Strategists are people that adopt, adapt, and lead adoption of tools and techniques and all of that within business. So you kind of want to be at that level and that proficiency where you don't use a tool because that's what you know that tool does for, but you can actually take that tool, for instance, and you can adapt it for the situation because you've got the knowledge behind that to do that. A little story is that when I was still in South Africa, very early in my career, I got put into leading a leadership team to do some strategy formulation. And I'll be honest with you, I failed dismally at it. I absolutely failed to the point that we had to stop the workshop because it just wasn't going anywhere. And it really came down to the fact that I did not know my craft well enough. I was probably sitting really around the skill level. I wasn't probably an expert level, and probably even just have it maybe between skill and practical knowledge. But today, I probably sit more in this area. And for me to walk into a room and just pick up a tool and use it is quite okay. But that's because I've got the background and the knowledge, and I am more proficient in what we're doing. So what you're saying here for strategic business analysis is that you've got to really become very proficient in your skills. You've got to have a skill set, and you've got to have the ability and the credibility and authority to be able to lead sometimes very strong personalities, people that are probably going to counteract you, and you got to be able to, when it's right and appropriate, to stand your ground and be able to stand on your craft and your tools to do something. So the competency model is a way of improving your level of confidence and ability when you're wanting to move into a strategic analysis role. I be honest with you, I would not see a junior BA working in this space purely because of the competency level. I talked about the framework earlier, and I think it's important that we work within frameworks because frameworks help us structure business thinking. They help us guide businesses to accomplish their missions. And they also can be used to analyze business issues and develop strategies. The nice thing about this one that the IABA released is that it's aligned to the BABOK, so you can actually use your business analysis skills you've learned from the BABOK and apply to a framework like this. As I said before, most organizations are going to have some sort of framework, and there are a lot of out there, and you need to be adaptable to be able to work within these frameworks and being able to adjust your business skills to work within that framework, being able to identify which tools and techniques that are appropriate for a particular portion of that strategy framework. Remember our definition of strategy, it's moving from strategy to execution. And you as a business analyst are going to be working in that framework. You're going to not only just be coming up with the strategy, the change strategy and all that, but you're most likely going to be working in creating the implementation plans. You're going to be working to implement that plan. You're probably even going to be leading other BAs on the project initiatives and the delivery initiatives. So having a framework just helps everyone sing on the same hymn sheet, so to speak, if I can use a little bit of a cliche word. So bringing this all together of what we've been looking at over the last few slides in terms of the jobs and that, and to sum up particular last two slides, I think if you want to work as a strategic analyst, there are a couple of things that you should be comfortable with. You need to be able to be comfortable to be working at organizational level, looking at the why and the what. So you need to be able to focus across an organization, looking at various moving parts, various elements and internal things versus external things within an organization to see what is impacting that organization. You need to be creative and innovative in the use of your business craft. sometimes it's not a one size fits all, and you need to be able to adapt tools and techniques to help your leadership team get more understanding. You need to be comfortable in leading the adoption of change. If we look at the strategy analysis knowledge area in the BABAC, it talks about change management within that. And so you need to be able to work within that framework. Even looking at some of the change management frameworks out there is also something that I would recommend you be looking at as well. You need to be comfortable in being able to identify a need for change and explaining the rationale for change and driving that change. The leadership are going to be looking to you to be that person. Going back to my early story where I did not get the strategic role, and by the way, it wasn't called strategic business analyst, it was just called principal business analyst, but it was actually a strategic role. So when I didn't get that job, one of the things, as I told you, was that I was looking at it from a project delivery point of view and not looking at it from a strategic level. And this point speaks exactly to that. The feeling was, based on the feedback or based on the way I answered the question, was that I was not proficient in identifying needs, business opportunities, business sets from absolutely nothing. I was really proficient at a project level where I was given some sort of context and I was able to then formulate some sort of ideas out of that. And that actually came down to because at that point, I didn't really understand the difference between strategic analysis and business, normal or traditional business analysis. And this is why it's important to be able to identify and define what it is. And hopefully you're starting to get that. So let's move on a bit and let's look at some of the tools and techniques that you could probably use or you should be proficient in. And the next few slides, I'm just going to take you through a couple of techniques. I'm not going to teach you how to do it. We don't have the time to do that. And these are not the only ones. These are some of the ones that I'm familiar with and that I work with a lot in my work that I do here in New Zealand with small businesses. And I know that they work well. And so for you, you can jot these down. If you want the slide presentation, just drop me a line. I'll send you a PDF of the slides. Go and research them. Go learn how to use them. Some you'll be familiar with, some you won't. So the first one is Cynefin. It's pronounced Cynefin. And Cynefin is just a structured approach to finding the correct solution or the correct answers to match the conditions of the problem. And we put them into these 4 different categories. Next one is SWOT. And we all know what SWOT tool is about, so I'm not going into too much detail about that. But it's really a great tool to help you reduce the chance of failure by understanding what the organization lacks, eliminating hazards that would either catch you unawares. So that is quite a useful tool to use in your toolkit. PESTLE is another one. We all know PESTLE from our BABAC days. And this is just big picture thinking. It helps you understand the changes in your business environment and how these can impact the opportunities or the threats for your organization. MOST, which is an ideal tool to help you align your strategy. And the idea behind MOST is that you organize your activities to support each other. So your tactics need to support your objectives. You need to support your strategy and your mission. So it's a useful tool to line things up. Another tool that is very useful, and you'll see it talked about in BABAC and strategy analysis, is gap analysis. And that's being able to look at where your current state is and your future state is, and be able to determine what is the gap between the two. And from that, you'll develop your strategies on how you're going to bridge the gaps, or first probably even prioritize which gaps you need to do. Porter's 5 forces focus on your external environment, being able to look at your external environment and how that influences your organization. Strategic plan, that is just really coming down to being proficient in being able to present or write a strategic plan, whatever format your organization uses. I would suggest learn, those organizational artifacts that we talk about in BABOK, is go and find out what the organization uses and get very proficient in using those kind of tools. And the final one here is the strategic roadmap, which is, I find a very useful tool. I'm very big on visualization as opposed to lengthy Word documents. I think the age of lengthy Word documents is gone, and visualization is where we need to be, because a picture tells 1,000 words. A picture creates consensus. So for me, the strategic roadmap, which is able to link your strategy and initiatives to tactical actions, is very useful, because then your C-suite can, when they say, well, how are we going to achieve this? They can look at something like this and say, okay, here's the steps, here's what we're going to do. Of course, I mean, I would be remiss in ignoring the strategy analysis within the BABOK. And it's also kind of a framework, because I think, and I use this a lot in when I take small business through some sort of planning session, because it's a useful way for you to structure your business analysis planning when it comes to strategy analysis. You will notice that within this, there are elements of the other BABOK knowledge areas: elicitation, designs from rapid analysis design, and jeepers, I can't remember the entire word, bad on me, rapid analysis design definitions, I think it was. Oh, as a CBAP, I'm very, very ashamed of myself. I can't remember that. Prioritize requirements, that's from your requirements lifecycle management. And then your business objectives, potential value, all of that is part of your strategy analysis. And then we're talking about stakeholder engagement. That comes from your planning, it comes from your collaboration, all of that. And then current state, future state, that's all within your strategy analysis. And then risk analysis. Notice there, change strategy. We go back a slide. There's our strategic plan, strategic roadmap. So that kind of talks to that. And then these on the side are just the components that help me to kind of think about when I'm talking to a small business, and to think about the technology. What about the technology is going to impact the strategy? What about the business architecture? How is your business structured? There's your gap analysis that we talked about earlier over there. And remembering the internal and external influences. What are the policies and constraints within that business? What policies has the business owner put in place? What policies do the government have, the regulational policies and constraints from a legal point of view that constrain the business? All of this is used within your strategy analysis, and you need to, as a strategic business analyst, be very proficient being able to identify this and to lead your organization in identify it. So looking at something like this is very, very useful to help you holistically look at a strategic business analysis. Of course, there's also the techniques within business analysis that you also need to be mindful as well. And I'm not going to go through this, but you know where to find them in the business. So to wrap up this section and part before we just close off for the final slide next is, it's about your competency. You need to get your competency up to a level where you are comfortable standing up and being able to stand on your tools and your techniques. You need to be able to lead your C-suite team. And to do that, you need to know your craft inside out. So using something like the competency model can really help you get to that point in whatever tool you use, whether you get a coach that coaches you to be more strategic as a business analyst, or to be at a more strategist level, whatever helps you. You need to understand that you kind of really need to be able to stand in front of your C-suite and be able to, and your leadership team, and to be able to lead them. And that comes from having confidence in your ability and your competence, and then being comfortable in working within a framework. So let's just wrap this up and just summarize for me the pathway. And there are 4 elements. And that's why I said it's not essentially a pathway. It's just 4 elements or 4 strategies that I have used with my clients to get them into strategic business analysis roles. And the first thing is that mindset. We talked earlier about being able to shift between the different mindsets. We talked about being able to think from a holistic organizational level versus a project delivery level. And you need to be comfortable with being able to move between those two. The second one is being comfortable with ambiguity. We talked earlier about the uncertainty and the possible ambiguity that comes early on in strategic analysis, because essentially you're starting with a blank canvas and you're then going out and doing all your research and gathering data, and there's conflict in data and there's a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty. Now, here's the thing. I mean, I can hear someone in the back of my mind, figuratively, not literally, saying, well, yeah, that's great, but who's uncomfortable with that in business analysis? Because we are pretty strong personalities. And you'll be surprised the number of business analysts that I've worked with that are not comfortable with uncertainty, that are, uncomfortable with uncertainty. I was just coaching a business analyst just the other day, and he's battling because he's in a very uncertain project and wants to actually get off the project because he feels like he is in a place where he doesn't know what's happening. And he doesn't feel like he has the competency for it, and he doesn't feel like he understands the business well. So you've got to get comfortable with ambiguity, and you've got to be comfortable with uncertainty. And it's not to say that it doesn't happen in projects, but it's at a lower level. The third thing is the foundation. And we talked about this through this and these and the competency model as well. So this is just having the underlying foundation. This is being able to use your craft strategically. And to use your craft strategically, you need to know it very well. You need to be able to use elicitation and collaboration at a strategic level in order to understand what needs to change and why it needs to change. Being able to extract out of solution and enterprise evaluation the concepts and the ideas and the thoughts that can go into a strategic analysis, and being able to join those dots. The other thing that you need to have a good understanding is about strategy analysis. So looking at that. So if you're using the Babok, just have something that really gives you that strong foundation to work with. And the final thing is about growing into opportunity. And I mentioned earlier about John Maxwell's quote that you grow into opportunities not given. And here's my pet peeve when I coach clients, is that a lot of them say, I'll use that skill set, or I'll do that when I'm in that role. And the reality is that 99% of roles or positions that you get in life, in your career, are not just given to you. It's because you've displayed a skill, a competency, an ability where you are before you got the role that attracts someone and says, hey, that person is right for this role. And the same thing goes for job interviews. When you're going for a job interview and that job is slightly different or in a different role, or it's a different career type, what you're actually doing is showing people that, hey, I've got the skill, I've used the skill in past jobs that are transferable into this role, and this is why I'm perfect for the role. So start being strategic where you are. Start using your position where you are right now to find the opportunities to practice your skill set, to practice all of this, to practice these techniques, and to not only practice them and to increase your level of competency, maybe using something like the competency model, but also to demonstrate the value to the organization that you're working for, but not only to the organization that you're working for, to build experience for you to use if you want to apply for maybe a more strategic role, like strategic consultant or portfolio strategic analyst, as we talked about earlier. So those are, for me, the 4 pillars, or probably the 4 foundational areas to use in order for you to segue yourself into a strategic business as well. I hope that you kind of understood the difference between strategic analysis and business analysis, and that it's more about the different viewpoints that we use. We use basically the same business analysis techniques, but we look at it from a different viewpoint. I hope through this presentation that you've kind of got an idea of ways that you can actually improve your techniques to be at a strategic level. And with that, that's me done, and thank you very much. I'll hand over for some questions.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for that lovely presentation. Good evening, everyone. I just want to touch on something that you said very quickly about opportunity not being given and rather being grown. And I think that's very important for all of us, just to be mindful of the spaces that we're in, that in order to move to the next level, we need to look at opportunities around us and start applying those skill sets where we want to be in order to display that we are able to perform at that level, at the next level. I'll just go to the questions now. We have our first question from Viwe, and Viwe would like to know, what advice would you give to someone who is starting their career as a business analyst to succeed in this role? Thank you.
So I think the first thing I would say is learn the business analyst craft. If you're still just starting out in the role, you're not going to have the credibility, you're not going to have the level of competency that probably a C-suite are looking for. It's like applying for a senior business analyst role when you start out. Chances that most people are not going to hire you in that role when you just start out. So the first thing for me is get into the business analyst techniques. Some of these techniques that I spoke about earlier on the, let me get back to that slide quickly. So some of these techniques, start learning how these work. Do some YouTube, start practicing them in that. But at this point, because you're just starting out, I would suggest just get the basics, work on the foundation, that area. That's where you want to be working on right now. You want to be becoming proficient in this, and then at a later stage, you can start to actually move more into that strategic role.
Thank you, Paul. Our next question is from Mohammed. Mohammed would like to know, what is the difference between a strategic business analyst and a business architect?
So a strategic analyst and a business architect. So business architecture is more about the structure of the business. It's more about how do the various parts of the business work together to achieve the operations of the business. Now, that's not to say that business architects don't work strategically. A strategic analyst is probably looking at more holistically the organization, as we talked about in that, where's that definition? There. So all aspects of the organization. So at a strategic analyst point of view, you're looking at it from the external and internal. A business architect is probably looking at more from the internal side of the organization. He's looking at the structure of the organization. What are the resources and the capabilities that the organization needs in order to achieve the operations and even some of the strategic initiatives. So there's a bit of overlap between the two, but I think the business architect is more focused, with the strategic analyst is more about the entire organization.
Thank you, Paul. Our next question is from Lishoko, and he would like to know, in a product-focused organization, where does the strategic business analyst fit versus a product owner or product manager?
So the strategic analyst, if he's working as a strategic analyst, is working on probably across products. He's working at an organizational level. I'll bring you back to this definition here. Focus on all aspects of the organization. So he's defining the strategy, the direction, that the organization wants to go through. And from that might flow some product initiatives, which come down to the product owner or the product manager. So for instance, just a simple, quick one, the strategy analyst might come up with a very simple strategy. We need to increase the number of memberships on our site. And then it's the product, that's the general strategy. And then the product owner then needs to look at how do we implement that strategy within our product, which might be a website or whatever it is. And they will then come up with different sort of probably business or product level strategies in order to achieve that. And then that will translate eventually down into solutions and functional requirements and all of that.
Thank you, Paul. And we are taking our last question for the evening, which is from Kundisai. Sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. And the question is this a role and skill set that is increasing in demand?
So just repeat it again. I didn't hear the last part.
Is this a role and skill set that is increasing in demand?
I can't say that I've seen it, a role set that's increasing in demand as a strategic business analyst. But I do think strategic analysis in a holistic, non-BA kind of terminology is something that definitely I think we've seen coming through with, especially with COVID, where organizations have had to pivot themselves. The question I think for us is where do we as business analysts fit within it? How can we show our skill? How can we show our abilities in that role as business analysts to help organization? So I think the opportunity is right for us as business analysts to be able to demonstrate what we can bring to the party, to demonstrate our skills and our abilities, and to say, hey, world, don't forget about us. We can help you with the strategy. I don't think organizations, based on the research I did, have really cottoned on to the title or the role strategic business analyst yet. I've certainly not seen one yet coming through.
Thank you very much, Paul. And I think that brings us to the end of our session today. I'd just like to call upon Edward, the president of the IIBA SA, to just give a closing remark before we all leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Nesipo. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Paul. I think your talk was well delivered. I fully agree with you. Definitely, there's not going to be a point where you have a strategic BA. We have to be strategic where we are. It's just the way you said it. So this is definitely a mindset thing. We have to change the way we see business analysis, the way we engage with the stakeholders, the way we position ourselves within the organization, so that we are part and parcel of strategic discussions, strategic direction, and called upon to give input to our stakeholders during those discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Nice to hear from you again.
And same, it was good listening to you, Paul.
Yeah, it's time we did another article together.
I think we must, man. We must.
Yeah.
Yes, but thanks for making the time to talk to us.
It's a pleasure, mate. It's a pleasure, mate.
Yes.
Right. No other questions?
No, Paul, there aren't any other questions. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just say thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you for listening. Hope I made sense. Please contact me or connect with me if you want to. On my, let me just get that slide up quick. Whoop, sorry. There we go. So there you want to just connect with me. Great to hear from you. And thanks, IBA South Africa. Miss you lot a lot.
Thanks, Paul. We miss you too, and it was lovely to host you this evening. And with that, good night, everyone. And Paul, hope you have a lovely Friday.
Yes, my day is just starting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.